So what's the first thing? The first thing is we want good admin. We want to make sure that your question can be found and we know when to pay attention to them and when not to pay attention to them. So always mark your question with help or solved at the beginning of the title if you have no other way of showing that a question has been solved. So for example, if you go to a specific question and answer forum like Stack Overflow, you'll find that they have mechanisms in place to show that a question has been answered or not. We don't in our forums on Unity, and many other forums don't. So it's always useful to add in at the beginning of the title of your question to make sure that you say help or solved so that people don't have to worry about looking at questions that have already been solved. Also use clear descriptive titles and correct grammar and punctuation and full sentences when you're actually asking the question. Those things are important to make it easy to understand what you're talking about, easy to find the problem, and easy to pass, because we have some even for non-native speakers of English who will find it much easier to pass full sentences than abbreviations or partial sentences. So that's the first one. Have good admin when you do a question, and don't forget to mark it as solved once the question's been answered. So you need to write a good description, and that means you need to describe the problem thoroughly, and the best way to do that is actually something from programming and from software engineering, is just format it as a bug report. So things in the bug report that you need to include are observed behavior, what you saw happen, the expected behavior, how the observed behavior differed from the expected behavior, what you want to happen, and then the steps to reproduce the actual occurrence. So how would you reproduce the problem to that step, to that situation, so that you can reproduce it on, say, on my machine or on somebody else's machine. And then a list of things you've tried out already, so that we don't duplicate our efforts by having somebody who wants to answer your question trying out things you've already done. Now, make sure you include all the relevant information, includes the errors and the warning in full. If you have errors and warnings, add them in full. Include the version information for the products you're using. In our case, it's going to be Unity. It's quite important. Version information matters a lot. Different versions will have different programming API, so that means they have different way of doing the same thing, and we need to know which version to look at to answer your question. Make sure you use screenshots generously to show the problem. Take the screenshot of both the entire window so that we can see your inspector and your hierarchy. Those are important information when you've got an object selected, as well as a smaller screenshot of the problem you're having itself. Sometimes a screenshot isn't appropriate, it's not suitable. Use your judgment to see whether you should use a screenshot. Most of the case, if you've got a visual problem in the game, a screenshot always helps, and it never hurts. Use a code hosting service. That's another really good tip. Not many general purpose forums are good to share code on. In Udemy, at least, the coding sharing is okay for one line or two, but it really breaks down when you have any more code to share. It's really not designed for sharing code. So use the right tool for the right job. Use pastebin.com or gist@github.com to share your code. It's all going to be syntax highlighted. Make sure you post complete files. Often we'll find that a student has had an issue in one line, but actually it's a syntax error that the student made 5 lines earlier. So make sure you include the complete file. However, you don't want people to read your entire file. So point them at the line that you think is the problem. If there's an error message, the line on which the error occurs should be available to you, and you should point people directly to that line. Screenshots are a reasonable alternative for code. So for example, automatic syntax highlighting can help guide you, and if you have a problem with that, it's much easier to take a screenshot of the automatic syntax highlighting in MonoDevelop or whatever IDE you're using than it is to see the same problem in a different editor online. So that's when a screenshot is a reasonable alternative. Build a minimum viable test case. That's a really useful tool. It's essentially, you don't want any code in the code you're going to be sharing with somebody else to not be relevant to your problem directly. So code does lots of stuff. You'll have a file that does a bunch of different things, and your problem will be with only one aspect of that code. You really want to make sure that the entire code that you're going to be sharing with somebody else is only the code relevant to the problem. You need to make sure that what you're sharing still exhibits the problem, all right? And still has the problem. So it's a fully working piece of code that only includes code that's relevant to your problem. It's a lot easier to reason about small code samples than large ones, and it's easier for other people to find the problem as well. So the golden rule is write a question the way you'd like to be asked, and don't ask until you've tried 3 different things to solve the problem yourself. And really, there's a secret to this. The secret is asking questions like this makes it more likely that you will find a solution yourself. In fact, asking questions like this, having a thorough, well thought out description with all the relevant information, means most of the time you'll solve the question yourself and you will learn something about it. So actually asking good questions makes you better at being a programmer or being a developer. So that's the secret. The secret is good questions help you learn. And finally, there's some great resources on how to ask a good question that are very thorough. How to ask on Stack Overflow is a great one. It's very concentrated and very focused. John Skeet's Writing the Perfect Question is also very good. He spends a lot of time answering questions on Stack Overflow, and he has a very good idea of what makes a good question. And finally, How to Ask the Questions the Smart Way is a really long-form resource that covers a lot of the topics we've gone through today, as well as many more, and it is an exceptionally good read. Value for money in terms of reading this, the time you're going to spend versus the time you'll save in the future is huge.